That'll be fun. That'll be fun.
So how is she working?
Good evening, Oriole Nation. We're getting started. Hold on and let's fly.
Thanks for helping her.
Yeah.
We're all good with live stream going, so yep.
Alrighty, we're gonna get back into the open session. And our first item is board mission statement. And
our board mission statement, we will develop policy as representative of our community, set goals, and lead our district by collaborating. And then our beliefs are stand up and own it, that individual, like how can we come together and share where we're at and what we believe in. And then the we are one is that idea of we're coming together as a team and we're gonna make sure that we lean on each other and hear each other's stories and respect each other's stories as we're walking through the work. And then we're always courageous enough to grow and to learn in the interactions that we're part of.
all right. Our next item is approval of the consent agenda, and we have 3 items on this month's consent agenda. The first one being the approval of the January 29th regular board meeting minutes, which were in our packet. Additionally, were the approval of February 8th special board meeting minutes, also in our packet provided. And then final was our treasurer's report, which was detailed out in our board packet. So we're looking for a motion to approve that consent agenda for those 3 items.
So moved.
Second.
Then roll call on that.
Hawk, yes. Matthew,
Yes.
Jaeger,
Yes.
and Geckerman,
Yes.
Gurlowski, absent.
All right. Motion carried. And then our next item is board members share moment of pride. I don't know if anyone would like to go first.
I'll go first.
Okay.
So I know Coach Ibarra was not initially hired for the role of basketball coach, but I just want to put a shout out. I went to a few of the games, and just even though the team isn't real successful, the kids play hard for them. The bench is always cheering throughout the game, and it's creating a positive culture, which is really good to see. So I think it was a great move accepting as basketball coach.
Go ahead.
I saw where both the forensic and the robotics team had some great success the last 6 or 7 weeks, so shout out to those guys. And then the last thing real quick is I saw where Mr. Gonzalez for the parent-teacher conferences changed it to a student-led parent-teacher conference, which was a new concept, and I thought it was a great idea. I've had some pretty positive feedback about it, and I'm sure there'll be tweaks to it going forward, but I just appreciate that Mr. Gonzalez initiated that and gave it a try. So trying new things and not being afraid to do that and finding something that works is what we're all about. So shout out to Mr. Gonzalez for putting that into place.
It was a pretty quiet month for me. I was out of town for a while with that, so don't have anything real specific. It's been hitting a lot of basketball games both here and other places, and I enjoy high school sports, and it's tournament time right now, so everything is pretty exciting. So I guess that's my moment.
Yeah, and I also had the robotics program in mind, and then I had 2 other ones. I think it was announced yesterday or today. Congrats to our top 10 that was shared out. That's always cool to see, and excited to see what we hear at graduation for next steps for them and the rest of the team. And then the Little Dribblers program. So this is my basketball heart coming out. Appreciate everyone for taking the time to do that, and I couldn't believe the turnout that was there. It was pretty impressive to see, not only for the boys and girls program, that we have a enthusiastic, bright future. So excited for everyone that put in the effort for that. Alrighty. Our next item is Horace Mann Student Council. So all you.
Okay, so we had a lot. We had the pink out game, and there was a huge crowd when the girls beat Mayville. The 74-second dash for cash, we raised $439.70. And then all the proceeds from the game, which was a total of around $700, it went to the Susan G. Komen for the Cure Foundation. And then for Powder Buff, we did a volleyball competition, but before it began, we did some activities. So we played musical chairs and head shoulders cup. That is always my favorite. And then for Powder Buff, the seniors ended up being the juniors. And then the seniors and the juniors both beat the staff when we played. And then for forensics, the entire team advanced to the sub-district, to the from sub-district to districts. And then this afternoon and tonight, the forensics team will have hosted the conference meet and hopefully competed very well. And then the district competition will be held at Neenah in March, and then they will go to state from there. And then the ice fishing team has made the top 20 list for state competition, and further results will be discovered later on. And then another state, powerlifting state, is this weekend in Appleton, and 8 athletes qualified for that. And then we also have solo ensemble this Saturday from 8 to 4, and AMRO is hosting that. And then lastly, Mrs. Coe and Mrs. Hintz have announced that at the end of the year, they are stepping down as student council advisors, and they will be training new ones. And that is all I have.
Any questions or comments?
Do they do Key Club also, or are they gonna stay with that?
They're gonna stay with Key Club and NHS, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep,
And
just
do all
student
three?
council,
Oh,
yeah.
So got some good things coming up
Yeah.
this weekend too, powerlifting and
Lots going on.
celebration of all those individuals who were able to go. I think with 7 or 8.
There was 8, yep.
Yeah, it's great. And then solo ensemble so that's both vocal and instrumental as well?
Yep.
Okay, nice. Very cool.
All right, well, great job.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. All right, our next item is our band's Oriole leaders.
So I'd like to introduce you to a few of our finalists here. Annabelle Coates is a 6th grader, and then we have Joey Hester, who is a 7th grader. So they said they wanted to do all the work tonight. Annabelle's gonna tell us some things that we've done throughout the year, and then Joey's gonna tell you just a few things that are coming up here in a couple months. Annabelle.
So some of the things that our band's Oriole leaders have accomplished so far this year, towards the beginning of the year in October, we had a hat day for a fundraiser for cancer patients, and we raised $138 that all went to Heavenly Cats. Towards November, we helped out with the Optimus Pancake Breakfast, which was a success for all of us. Later on in November and early December, we did bell ringing for the Salvation Army, and there's different Oriole leaders that participated in 3 different days during school for that. In December, we went to Optimus Park during the Christmas lights, and we got to pass out hot chocolate and candy canes, which we got a lot of people that came to that. And then while the first half of the year has gone on, we've planned different dress-up days, such as the homecoming dress-up weeks and the winter dress-up weeks of the band. And then we also have 2 different school dances, our Halloween dance and our Valentine's Day dance, and then we also help with different assemblies.
And then Joey, a couple things coming up here.
So in March, we have the American Heart Association fundraiser, school-wide. We'll have games, facts for awareness, and competitions with raising money. Then April, we'll have 6 meeting with Ted Night Ski. Canceled, but we are looking for other dates that will work. So we're hoping like all of us that are going and get the opportunity to go will learn more leadership skills to help the classroom. And then 4th quarter, the ELC kids will be coming at the end of the day, so we just playing them in the gym as the and then we also have end of the year activities like talent shows, assemble these and, well, that we'll be planning as it happens.
And then just a shout out to Nate Hughes as an advisor. Sarah McDowell's not here, she's another advisor, so it's been nice to kind of share the experiences with them.
Awesome. Any feedback, questions, feedback?
What's your favorite part about being an Oriole leader?
My favorite part about doing it is just helping, I guess, around school, but also doing things for other organizations. Like the Heavenly Hats is one of my favorites because we're able to give to people that needed different things. So I guess the activities that we plan and help do.
Thank you.
My favorite parts are getting out, helping, learning more leadership, like bell ringing. That was nice for me. Fundraising for the Salvation Army and giving more moments to help people out.
That's great.
You both did a great job, first off. Not easy, right, at first, but all the results you shared, the $138 for the hats piece and the bell ringing, and you had my year at hot chocolate, so I missed on that, but thank you for all your leadership, all right? Great job. All right, anything else?
Thank you.
All righty. Our next item is clerk's report.
All right, well, I will do that in the absence of the clerk tonight. The donations were very impressive. Backyard Buddies, Carol Turner, $1,000. Darlene Hankey, $100. Denise Gationbrooks, $50. And All Tools NDT Inspection Service, once again, for $1,000 again. Score booths for the baseball, softball fields. Air Tech Heating, $10,000. Ahern Gross, $1,000. Optimist Club, $5,000. And Joe Janiak, $500. And then finally, the Trefford Way Playground, the Nuss Family Fund, $5,000. And Nelnet Foundation, $1,500. Very impressive.
That's awesome.
That was a great month.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone that was just mentioned, and Ricky said it best. What a good month. What a great month. All right, our next item is citizens' comments. And looking at the room, if anyone would like to share a comment, go right ahead. But I think we got some regular visitors here from the district, so. All right, we'll move on. Over to you, sir.
All right.
Superintendent's report.
Here we go. Let's fly. We're gonna go through the strategic plan. We have 4 different buckets: financial operations, safe and emotional healthy schools, learning and academics, and then engagement and communication. So how we roll is just talking about a little bit of each one of these. I'm gonna turn it over to our Vesta auditors first to, jump ahead so that you can go on your way too as well tonight. If you want to do an introduction of yourself, and really appreciate it.
Sure. My name's Logan Krieger. I've been with Vesta, formerly known as Huberty. I don't know if you're, obviously you're aware at least a little bit about our name change, kind of just get online with our brand. We kind of redid our brand name, menu of services, got away from our old shareholder's name who's been retired for 20 years, gone from a one firm mentality. So we figured we'd need a name to kind of encompass all that. I've been an auditor with Vesta now just a little over 6.5 years. So I'm working with pretty much any entity that needs audit, from governments, nonprofits, public schools, private schools, for-profit entities. So, and I'll jump into the good stuff. I did bring packets for everyone. Thank you. So hand these out. I'll first thank Maria and her staff for everything that they do to get ready for us. I know it's not easy and may not always be fun. But I can tell you, we pretty much come in and take over this room. We spread out roughly anywhere from 2 to 4 people, depending on the day, kind of what's going on. Usually the first day is a little bit more. Then the second day and third day wind down a little bit. But Maria and her staff are great and always getting us everything we need. It's always very timely. We actually have like little office wagers for people to come here, because it's so well put together and organized. It's not that way everywhere. So that is appreciated. So to go through kind of the first part of this packet here, I've created a little bit of a cheat sheet, which is the first page there. It should say the School District of North Fond du Lac across the top. That's just kind of a summary of the financial information. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to digest this, kind of looking at the numbers overall and getting into the details. And I'll kind of touch high level on everything and leave the details up to Maria if there's more questions. So I'll refer to this as kind of the cheat sheet as we go. So we'll move to the second one. And it should be a letter that starts with in planning and performing the audit. This is what we call an issue as our internal control letter. Mainly if there's any suggestions we can offer to the district to improve internal controls or any other policy procedure that we feel may be necessary. For the district, we also like to provide an update of what's coming up in the new in the accounting world with any new accounting standards that are coming out, which is pretty much all that this letter is doing. So as new accounting standards come out, we work with Maria to determine the impact of that on the district. So there'll be a few things in here that I'll leave to your bedtime reading should you need it to help you fall asleep, but this might be one of those for now. I don't anticipate this standard really affecting too much going forward, at least for the district, and it'll be kind of a one-off situation should it come into effect. The next letter you have should say we have audited the financial statements, should be about a 3 or 4 page one. This is what we issue to, it's called a governance letter. It's a letter to you and the board, just to kind of describe how the audit went, any major issues that we might have or any disagreements or anything like that. We also go over significant estimates, which is kind of that indented paragraph there on the bottom. A big portion of that is the WRS actuarial study, is that they're going through their study, performing their estimates, and we're using that in our final reports. The last paragraph in this page talks about any difficulties in performing the audit. As I kind of alluded to already, we didn't have any, which is always good. The next paragraph, corrected and uncorrected misstatements just means any auditor adjustments that we might have. The biggest one, as I'm sure you're all aware about, was the self-funded insurance, which we'll touch on in a little bit. And then the next paragraph below that, the disagreements with management, that paragraph is pretty short, which is a good thing, means we didn't have any. Those are kind of the highlights of that letter. I found the missing letter. Next, we'll start with Treffert Way. This will be kind of short and sweet. I'll go over kind of any changes and then just a little bit of update. This is just Treffert Way. The Explorations Charter School is not included in this. Explorations was not subject to an audit for the 22-23 school year, where Treffert Way was. This will be the last financial statements that we'll issue for Treffert Way as the grant funding goes away. However, you'll get another audit just like this for Explorations in for 23-24 and going forward until that grant concludes as well. So even though Explorations, I know, did get a little bit of money here in 22-23, we worked with DPI and they determined that Explorations was still kind of in that planning phase and not necessarily fully operational, which is why they got grant money, but they weren't subject to the audit. So I'll kind of flip through, just kind of high level go through this, as there really wasn't a ton of change with Treffert. The first, in the auditor's report, in the first paragraph is kind of the main paragraph here that I'll touch on. That goes over our opinion. And again, we issued the second paragraph there. We're stating that we are issuing a clean opinion, that everything is presented fairly. We didn't have any issues or anything like that. Kind of the rest of the letter just goes through the basis of accounting we use, and then it goes through management's responsibilities, and then my team's auditor's responsibilities. And then it just goes through some of the reporting things in the back half. So page 6 and page 7 are what we call as governmental-wide financial statements. These don't tie back to what you'll see in Skyward, because there's things in there like fixed assets, which you can see on page 6. Any capital asset that is recorded on the district gets recorded as an expense, but for the government-wide, they are capitalized as an asset. So I'm just going to kind of skip over these, page 6 and 7, and I'm going to go to page 8 and 9, which kind of really show what the operational activity was for the year. Page 8, you can see, is pretty minimal. The reason for that, if you look at page 9, the number, or the first revenue source is the district subsidy, meaning that the Trefford will not show a loss, those will be subsidized by the district, which you see is that $1.3 million. And then the second revenue line item was the grant there. Revenue did go up a little bit this year with Trefford, but also so did expenses. So when expenses increase, then the district has to subsidize the charter school just a little bit more. Page 10 goes through the kind of a reconciliation between the government-wide and then the fund statements, which tie back to Skyward. It documents kind of what you have for capital assets and then the depreciation expense that goes along with those. And there's a footnote and a few more pages that kind of describes and displays that in a little bit better format. These are pretty, note A just goes over the district's accounting policies. None of those would have changed from any year prior. If you want to flip to page 14, feel free to stop me if I'm going too fast or if you have any questions to interject as needed. But page 14, note B is the capital assets there. So you can see that there, beginning of the year, there was 68,000, and then we had additions of 109,000 for an ending balance of the 177. And then we flip ahead a couple more pages, gets into another report that we issued on compliance over internal controls in regards to the government auditing standards. This letter also gets issued with charter and the district-wide. So I'm actually going to touch on this in the district-wide, and it'll make a little bit more sense when we talk about what's kind of what this letter is and what happens with it. So, any questions on Trefford?
Nope.
All right, the big one, the fun one. Okay, so these are the district-wide in total, or you can come and think of everything. If we flip to page 3, again, you'll see the independent auditors report being the first paragraph. They're pretty similar to what is issued for Trefford. And again, that second paragraph, we're stating that in our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly, and that there was no material adjustments or anything like that that would cause us to issue a different opinion where we'd have a lot longer discussion. We flip to page 8. This will be the statement of financial or statement of net position, and page 9 is the statement of activities. These again are the government-wide where they will not tie to Skyward because of the long-term activities. So there's the capital assets that get recognized here as an asset, and then there's also things like debt, which is recorded as a liability. But in the district operational accounting, the debt payments get recorded as an expense, versus on these two schedules, it's hitting a liability. Overall, there really wasn't a ton of change from last year as well. The biggest one coming in the cash and investments increased quite a bit, but as I'm sure you're all aware, a lot of that's due to the referendum money that came in right at year end, causing the biggest jump there. Kind of another thing that I wanted to touch on here, if you look in the liability section about the 7th or 8th line down, there's a net pension liability. That's the WRS statewide, government-wide, any governmental entity that you pay into your retirement. That switched from an asset to a liability, meaning if everyone that was employed by the government retired today, they wouldn't have enough to fund it. I know that sounds a little bit scary. There is another page here that I'll touch on a little bit later that kind of shows the history of the WRS study. And again, that's based on their actuarial study. So looking at, the average age of the retirees in the pool, kind of what's coming in for contributions, what's the average rate of people retiring every year. It also factors in the market. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the last couple of years on the market has been pretty crazy. And this actuarial study is actually based on the calendar year. So their study for the 6/30/22 year end is based on 12/31 of 22. So it's still not kind of coming up. The market's 23, kind of saw a little bit of an incline there. So that's not necessarily reflected in this study. There was, probably before I was born, there was a case where districts had to owe that money back, or they had to take out a loan with WRS. we're not aware of that ever happening again. So if you guys have heard of that, it's came up in a few other boards that we've talked with, where they have people who have been on the board for a long time, they bring that up. But we don't see that foreseen to happen. We haven't heard of that even being a thought of. It's flipped between an asset and a liability every year, or the last couple of years. Last year was about a $4.5 million asset, where this year it's about a $3 million liability. So then looking at the statement of activities, page 9. So when we talk about that pension flipping from an asset to liability, that change gets ran through this statement of activities. So if you compare this statement this year to last year, you'll notice that expenses look crazy high. They're in the expense column of like 38 million. Well, a lot of that's due to this like liability. So I actually want to skip ahead to page 10 and 11. These 2 pages are what we'll tie to Skyward. We'll tie back to the reports that you're seeing as the board. Kind of the more operational aspects there. The general fund, if we look at, you guys are separate pages for you. Okay, perfect. We'll talk about the balance sheet first. The general fund and the debt service fund really didn't have too much of a difference. The other capital projects funds, you'll notice the cash there of the 17.8 million. That was the referendum money that came in at the end of the year. So kind of that's the biggest change there on this schedule. The bottom half of this walks through kind of that long-term activity. You can see a little bit of the way down, talks about the general obligation debt, meaning that there's $41 million that the district is in debt. Kind of walks through those long-term activities that are mentioned on the front. And again, there's footnotes that describe this that'll go in a little bit more detail that makes it a little bit easier to digest. But if we look at page 11, going through the statement of revenues and expenditures, if you kind of look back at your the cheat sheet that I have here, you'll notice that the general fund did see increases in revenues and expenses. Revenues increased about 5%. While expenses increased 7%. So you'll see there is a little bit of a dip into the fund balance. Now I know the self-funded insurance, you obviously took a little bit of that hit. So I think overall, the general fund I think is performing pretty well. You'll notice there that we take the fund balance and put that into expenses, and we get a percent of 15%. We generally like to see that between 15 and 20, meaning that the district is investing enough money back in to the students, into the education. And that you're not overspending by too much, and that you're not just hoarding money and building fund balance. So keeping it between that 15 to 20% is generally a good rule of thumb. The last 2 years, you're right at 18% this year, and we saw a little bit of a dip down to 15. I'm still not overly concerned. Looking at your fund balance, you're still at $3.5 million there. So that's still fairly healthy. The debt service fund, expenses increased quite a bit, or I shouldn't say quite a bit, they increased a little bit there. A lot of that's due to the debt that's been taken on by the district over the last couple of years. Obviously, everyone's aware of the referendum project this year, and then the last couple of years that the other referendum project. The other capital projects fund, again, you'll notice revenues increased by about 18 million. Again, that's the referendum, so we'll kind of skip over that one there. Page 12, again, goes from the reconciliation of the long-term activity versus what's recorded in Skyward. We kind of talked about most of these already. So page 13 goes into the district's accounting policies. These are also the same as what's issued in the Trefford statements. And again, nothing really has changed there. However, I do want to skip ahead to page 21. The top paragraph there in 21 talks about any new accounting pronouncements that were issued in this last year. If you remember last year when we had this discussion, we talked about leases and how leases are now being recorded on the balance sheet. Same concept with this standard, except it's with subscription-based technology arrangements. So kind of looking at the IT piece. We didn't, after evaluation with Maria and kind of our discussion, we didn't come across any. So nothing to really report there, except that there was a new accounting pronouncement that got issued. And then the rest of that paragraph just kind of talks about what's coming down the pipeline that, again, we'll evaluate, with Maria as they turn effective here. So if we flip to page 22, I'm just gonna kind of touch a little bit about some of the changes to these. A lot of these really didn't change from year to year. The only thing new for page 22 is the bottom section there. You'll notice that there's the new investment for the referendum project of about 17 million. So other than that, this note has stayed the same. So if we flip over to page 24, one of the coolest things I think that North Fond du Lac can offer and has been able to do for a number of years is note D, to have that paragraph be about one sentence. Meaning the district hasn't taken on any short-term debt to help supplement, the expenses during the timing of tax payments and, when grant claims are coming in. So, that's another good idea or a good, tracking mechanism there to see how the district is doing, if they're having that short-term borrow or not. And I think this is our third year audit, so it's our third year in a row having that paragraph. I think looking back at prior year audits, I think that's always been the same. So kudos to you guys for budgeting well and being aware of that. Note E, this goes through the long-term obligations. This is an important one, I think, to look at in terms of when you're planning ahead and looking 3 and 5 years out. It goes through where all of your debt is at and the balances. And if we flip to page 26, I think that's the first paragraph of the first table on page 26 there, shows the maturity schedule of what the future payments look like for the district. I think that's the important one to really look at of when things are coming due and how much is going to be paid out here over the next 20 years or so. The next paragraphs down there talking about the advance refunding. That's what the debt defeasance that happened in this year, where we were able to defease about 1.6 million in debt, saving the district about $823,000 of debt payments over the next 15 years. So another good move there to kind of save some money for the district and be aware of the long-term obligations. On page 27 and goes through page 39. That is another, I'll leave note for you guys to read through if you want to. That talks about the different pension with the WRS fund. Again, we take all of this from the WRS and their actuarial study, and we pretty much copy and paste it into our financial statements that way. So if we skip to page 40, the main event, self-funded. Everybody's favorite topic. So that was new this year. And I should have pointed the note actually. On page 10, if you flip back for just a quick second, I apologize for that. On the balance sheets, self-funded is required to be, their self-funded fund balance is required to be presented by itself and pulled out of the normal, or general fund fund balance. So you'll see there in the fund balance section, you'll see a deficit of $392,000 at June 30th for the fund balance. If we flip back to page 40, there's a couple pieces that make up the $392,000 deficit, and we'll kind of get into that. If we look at the fourth paragraph down, the one that says at June 30th, the district has a liability of $191,000, which is made up of two separate items. There's the part that is amount of claims reported to the district by the plan administrator of $67,575, and then there's the portion of $123,000 that is not reported to the district. So the amount that is reported to the district of $67,000 was actually invoiced in July, meaning it was invoiced in July, but it was for claims that relate back to prior to June 30th. The amount of $123,000, that is a number that's came up by the plan administrator. That's it's incurred, but it's not been reported yet. So it's claims that they're working through that they haven't invoiced back to the district yet. So the district wasn't aware of those until that report comes out. That's another year-end adjustment that we make at the audit time. So if you add those two together, that equals the $191,000 that we see in the front of that paragraph. That is built into the deficit for self-funded. The other remaining $200,000 of that is probably off of what you guys were seeing in a month-to-month, where that was built off of your spreadsheet there. Kind of the operating loss, if you will, meaning you paid more claims than what you collected in premiums is what that 200,000 was. And then we made the audit adjustment for the 191 to account for those kind of year-end timing differences, if you will. The not reported has been reported most likely now. Making that up now, I do know there are some new developments in the self-funded with getting kind of the stop loss aggregate and getting that check back. So that obviously helps this deficit. A lot of that stop loss, their calendar year versus your June 30th year. So that 515,000 you got most likely is probably a little bit from the 22-23 school year, and then also the first half of 23-24. But that obviously helps bring that deficit up. Now, I don't know how it looked from July to January, but I think as we go throughout this first year, you might have learned a few things, but then I think it's also just important to kind of just keep tracking that, and we'll see where we're at. And, you wanted to get together and talk about it again, so we can do that.
Yeah, see where we're at. Another development in that realm, we did decide to go with USI for consulting for a broker. So that will be a change beginning April 1st. So we're really trying to take a hard look at this and making some tough decisions with some partners that we think will be a good fit for us. So partner will finish up through March, and then USI will take over. So, yeah.
Perfect. That was one thing we discussed already and said that should, so that's done.
Any questions so far? Then we'll go to page 43, budget versus actual, and this displays the general fund, which is made up of actually two funds. Would be Fund 10, which is labeled as the general fund, and then Fund 27, which is your special education fund. Overall, if you look at the general fund, budget versus actual isn't too bad. There's a little bit of a variance in revenues and expenses, but overall, you're pretty dang close when you look at percentage wise. So again, good for you guys being able to budget and budget accurately, and make changes as you see fit. Kind of one piece that I wanted to point out here, if we look at kind of the other section there that transfers to general fund amount and transfers to special ed. As you know, special education usually runs at a deficit. At the end of the year, it's not allowed to have a fund balance, so it's supplemented by Fund 10. So that number is just important there of about the $2.8 million that was given from Fund 10, the general fund, into the special education fund. The next couple pages goes through more budget to actuals, but just for different funds. So page 44 is the debt service fund. Page 45 is the other capital projects fund. And then we get to page 46. Page 46 kind of displays that WRS asset liability that I was mentioning before. And it does, as you can see, it goes back to the history of 2014. So as the schedule builds, we're required to present 10 years from when this information is being compiled. So that's what you'll see here. The first pair, or the first number there, that 0.056%, that's the district's share in the overall WRS. So you can see it's very minimal, very small. The next number down is the liability there. The number is positive, that's a liability. If the number is negative, it's an asset. So you can see in 21, 20, and 19, it was all an asset. 18, it was a liability. And then from 2017, 2016, 15, and 14, it's kind of flip-flop. So we've seen 3 years of consistency. Now, this is always a year behind. So we might see that flip back next year once we get through 2023. Again, this is all stuff that's from their actuarial study. We just basically run a report for the district and plop the information down. So that actually is page 47, 48, 49, 50, 51. And then 52 goes through any changes that the WRS has implemented, or actually 52 through 54 goes through the changes that the WRS has made when factoring in their, when they're going through their actuarial study, if they change any estimates. Also just kind of describes how they come up with their parameters that they use. If we flip to page 57 and 58. So we've talked a lot about the general fund, the debt service fund, and those other capital project funds. Those are what are considered the district's major funds. The district's non-major funds, which would be your special revenue, food service, community service fund, and then a long-term capital improvement fund. We flip to page 58, just kind of look at the operating activity for the year. One thing I wanted to point out right away, if you look at the net change in fund balance, all these are positive, so that's really good. All of these funds are showing that, in addition to fund balance this year, which is always really good. A couple of the bigger changes, you'll notice the food service revenue, if you look back at last year, you'll notice that the federal funding was up over $1 million, and this year it dropped down to the 698. A lot of that was due to the COVID money that was out there for everyone to receive lunch or breakfast. A lot of that has ended. So you'll notice that expenses have also gone down because we're feeding less kids, we're receiving less money, so therefore you're paying out less money. Kind of a little bit of a bigger change in community services, that there was more property taxes levied this year than last year. And for the food service fund, the cheat sheet, you'll notice that revenues went down by 26% and expenses went down by 9%. So again, revenue went down by quite a bit, but expenses also went down just a little bit there as well. And then looking at the community service funds, another positive fund there, revenues went up about 121%, while expenses only went down 14%. So you'll see kind of a larger increase, taking that fund balance from actually a negative fund balance in the prior year to a positive fund balance here in 2023.
And that large revenue increase was due to adding Oriole Zone to the community service fund.
Thank you. The next couple pages are some letters. One of them goes over the internal controls and compliance with the government standards, like we talked about with the Trevor. It's the same letter, and you'll notice kind of down in the second to last paragraph on the first page, we do list, I'll call it like a deficiency, but it's really not a deficiency. But the accounting world, we have to label it as that. You'll see the number of 2023-001. We'll get into what that means and kind of what the impact is for the district. But then, no major findings other than this one little, deficiency, we'll call it, but the district has had that every year. And I would say out of all the districts we work with, all of them have the same deficiency. So we'll get into that a little bit. But the next letter goes over the internal control and the compliance over the state single audit side, or the state rules. In the second paragraph down, we're talking about our opinion. And again, we're saying that in our opinion, all of these financial statements are presented fairly, and that there was no major issues or anything wrong like that. The finding here is coming up in a little bit. So page 65 and 66 goes over, this is your schedule of expenditures of federal and state awards. 65 is your federal funds and 66 is your state funds. So this documents what funding you get from where for the federal and state sources, just a little bit more detail there. Page 68. This goes over our opinion, that we're saying that we're issuing an unmodified opinion. Unmodified means clean, or however you want to word it. If it was modified or anything else, we would have a little bit more paragraph or a little bit more discussion. But and then it also goes into the federal programs. We're required to test a certain amount of federal programs every year. So we always document which programs we tested, and then our findings or anything wrong that we have there. So if we look at page 69, this is where I talk about that deficiency comes in. It's for the preparation of financial statements. So if you look at the criteria paragraph, we would state that the district and district management and school board share the responsibility for the district's internal controls over the financial reporting under the generally accepted accounting principles. Although we assist the district in preparing these reports, us as auditors are not allowed to be included as part of the district's internal control. So just meaning that that there's no one here that is preparing these statements and taking the full responsibility of doing that. So again, we work with a number of districts, and I don't think we have a one that doesn't have this paragraph. So really nothing, it's labeled as a deficiency. It kind of sounds scary, but it's really nothing that's out of the blue or out of the ordinary that we see. The district's response to that is that it's just not fiscally responsible to go hire somebody or, to bring on the additional cost just to satisfy this one audit requirement that we deal with once a year. So that is all I have. Any questions? Anything I need to touch on again, or?
Can you go over this all once again?
Sure.
No, thanks.
Tomorrow?
Coffee?
Yeah.
Nice job.
Logan, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Your team has been, great to work with, and I know that we're just blessed with an awesome group of people too that make it happen too. So it's that mutual collaboration and work, and just Maria's work as well as everybody else in the office makes it so much, I think, again, great experience for everybody, as much of an experience it can be, but there's a lot of give and take in that collaboration, which I appreciate, and thank you for all you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate your time and letting me come in and discuss it. If you have any questions come up as you take a little deeper dive, if you want to forward them over to Maria, she can get them to me, and we can either schedule a Zoom or come in or whatever, however we want to do it. But
Thank you.
thank you. All right. Have a good night.
Too. All right. Staying in that financial operations, the referendum, where we're at right now, you're all going to get a tour on Thursday this week, so you're going to get a chance to see, a lot of the work as where we're at. All I gotta say is it's moving. It's moving at an extreme fast pace, which is phenomenal for us. I have to give some major shout outs to a lot of our staff for being very flexible, especially at the Bessie Allen area. We've had, I don't know, what would you say, Dave, 6 to 7 teachers displaced and moved to different places in the building?
Yeah, we're at, I think there's 7 or 8 that moved. And they did it all very graciously, so it was much appreciated.
And again, without any hesitation, very little questions. Hey, we'll figure this out and go. That whole staff got to see kind of an update of the tour that you're going to probably walk through again on Thursday, but they get to see that for the first time last week, Thursday. There was a lot of gratitude and amazement and wonder and just really, I think, an overall positive experience. So I'm not going to get too much into all the work because we're going to be going through it on Thursday with y'all. Unless you have specific questions that you're seeing or hearing about that we can update you with at this point in time. But the pace is fast. They're working on that middle pod right now, which was not expected to happen until the end of the school year. And so we're going to be well ahead of the game, and high school too, tying the schools together already, the 6 classrooms, that's done and moving. So pretty impressive stuff. Okay. Brad, you wanna, I thought it was really important, and just so that, again, part of that safe and healthy schools, we don't necessarily come back with what's going on within that safety arena. And so I wanted Brad to come in and share kind of just an update of some of the things that are going, well, and where we're at with our safety just as a district, and it's pretty fascinating stuff. So Brad, all yours.
Awesome, appreciate it.
Yep.
Well, it's been about 6 months since the last time we were here presenting some of this, so we've had a lot of work going on. Last week, Tuesday, we presented just similar slides to the staff at Friendship Learning Center over at BAMS, and then Horace Mann, just kind of giving an update of where we are, where we're heading, and what we're doing. We don't really have anything to hide. We have a lot of work to do yet, but we've made a lot of progress, so we're excited about that. So just part of our process always comes, with our E plus R equals O, and a lot of safety has a lot to do with this. I look at the bottom there, and it just kind of sums it up. Circumstances have no care for your feelings. You're responsible for responses to circumstances you didn't create. That just kind of highlights what some of the things we're talking about in our safety team, and how do we keep practicing and having that muscle memory, so in the event something would happen, we're prepared for it, we're ready, and we feel good about it. That's our goal, obviously. There's a lot wrapped in some of the drills and some of the things we're trying to plan and do, and We know there's some trauma in there and for some, and we're just trying to tread lightly in that, but also know that we have to do the reps to be able to feel good about what we're doing when it's happening. So we take that event and we just kind of make sure that we look at that discipline part, and it's intentional and skillful and on purpose. And if we have the opposite, we get some resistance on autopilot and impulsive, and we don't really want to be in that space when we're talking about safety. So our response matters, and what that outcome is, it has a lot to do with one, how we press pause, how we're curious before furious, or we control, we can control, and then those next best actions that we talk about during our safety stuff. So this really ties into those KPIs, and just looking at the beginning of the year, we had created this one in terms of how do we do safety audits. With Dr. Mito, myself, Maria, and Dave, we walked through all the schools and did some safety audits, talked to principals. Hey, what are some things you're concerned about? Just kind of got a list of those. As you know, our referendum is going to create some new challenges in terms of what we need and what we might need to do and with the new spaces. Great problem to have with the spaces. It's just some conversations we have to have moving forward on what that looks like. But just meeting some of those things and talking about how do we do our safety evaluations, just collaboration with local law enforcement and fire department has been incredible this year. We have to contact fire department at every single fire drill now. They just want to be involved and want to know. Years past, we really haven't had that. So that relationship is continuously building too, and they want to be involved in things. And I'll talk a little bit later about tornadoes and having Jake Flaherty, chief, wanted to be here and talk about, hey, where's safe spots here at Friendship and what does that look like? So we got a lot of good people in the right places right now. Just some of those wins. I have the safety binder here. I'll pass it around. This is one of the ideas the safety team came up with. Dwayne was a big part in this too, of just bringing, hey, what does this look like? So we have that consistency and common language that we talked about at the beginning of the year. And this is in all the schools. So you can see it's red, green, yellow is kind of in between here. Is just, this is part of our fire drill stuff too, of, hey, I'm missing a student. Hey, I have them all. We used to have cardboard cutouts. Everybody had different pieces. We're all on the same page. But this also gives our guests and our substitute teachers a great resource when they're in the building, because all the information's in here. We're talking phone numbers, trees, maps, anything that you can think of. Our crisis manuals in here. Our emergency response posters are in here. Where to go in the event of a tornado. It's just a one-stop shop of all of our resources in terms of safety. So I'll just take a look at that if you like. That was a big win. Just getting those all to schools real quickly. That never ends. We'll have to update that obviously as people retire, people leave, and just making sure that that's a yearly thing. And that's the same with our crisis manual, is always looking at how do we get better. Timely communications with families and staff with safety practices. That's one of the big things that we had some feedback on, is just how do we be timely in those communications when events happen or things pop up. I think we've done feedback we've gotten has been pretty good. Can we always get better? Of course. We had to build microwave into the high school, but we got that information out pretty quick. So we're getting better on that. We have teams working on what are those scripts and what are those things we can pull real quickly to get that information out. So safety walkthroughs, like I said, we did a lot of those. We're continuously doing those. Those will look different as our buildings grow. Those are good problems to have too. Fire drill success and collaboration again with the fire department. That's been a really good relationship. The guys are really good and interested in knowing what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then just we're able to ask a lot of questions and get a lot of feedback to be quicker and better at that. That's been fun in my world, is just getting to know those guys a little bit too, and learning from them. So they've been at BAMS, ELC, Trepford, they've been everywhere. So that's been awesome. Tornado drills, again, talking about just surveying, hey, what can we do better? We have a lot of different spaces in this building, Friendship. And how do we make sure we're moving nicely and quickly and safely, and making sure we have people in the right spots. So I know Jake's going to help me with that a little bit coming up here, to make sure we're in good spots. North Carolina Police Department, like I said, they helped us early on with the in-service. They've done some walkthroughs. Officer Hendricks is pretty good at just anytime you have a question or you have something, they'll be over here to help with that. Pete Burgos too has been amazing, just in terms of our building, coming over here and just answering some questions on, our windows. People have questions about the windows, and we did a walkthrough, and he had a lot of great suggestions, and I think it was good for our staff to hear just kind of what that is and, how we can prevent things and be proactive. So that was good. And then just updating school-wide maps as our buildings keep getting bigger, which is great. Just looking at friendships too, it's getting, 2019, it's getting old. So we gotta update those and make sure they look nice and we have access to those. So those are the big things. Right now, here's our safety team. Right now, we're up in 3 different subgroups working on the work. One subgroup is working on communication. So it comes back to some of that feedback we got from staff and families too, of making sure that we have that communication quick. And it's, has that information it needs to have in there, and just making sure we're not creating panic either. But having it developed so our secretaries can pull, or Karen in the office or somebody else in the district office to be able to pull that message real quickly, made a message, and be able to push that out. So we're working through that communication piece. Also working on an emergency response poster for our parents, getting that out to make sure that they understand, hey, what are our active threat? What does that mean? What does hold mean? And what does get in, stay in mean? So working on getting some of that stuff out. Planning is just working on some of the safety updates and best practices, and then when and where and why to provide updates and practices. Also with in-service, and how do we do that, and where can we do more drills, and looking at maybe where some of those PD opportunities are. Dwayne and I are going to have the opportunity in a couple of weeks to go to the Wisconsin School Safety Coordinators Association Conference. So working with some of those and networking with some of those people to help us develop better in terms of how do we plan and what can we plan for. Looking forward to that opportunity to learn there. And then the last one is reunification one. This is talking about our rally points. So in the event of an active threat or any other type of thing, we know where to go and what to do. You'll see here a little bit further, we have some maps and things, and we're working on those reunification protocols and then roles and responsibilities. So that's a big, big lift. We have a great partnership right now and continue to work on that part, and making sure that we have everything set up in there in the event that something would happen, we're ready to go. And we're pretty lucky to have the place we have right now. So, and then just always coming back to our emergency response posters, just trying to highlight some of that again for staff last week, and just remembering, hey, what do we do in the event of these? These are the things we want to also share with our parents as we start to, start talking about these. In the event things happen, we don't have parents showing up, or just kind of giving a guide of what that is and what parents can do in the event of an active threat, a hold, or get in, stay in, and what that means. So, our goal is obviously never to create panic, and this is probably one of the safest districts you can be in, because we got a lot of people doing the work and understanding what they need to do when they need to do it. So I won't go through all that. This is just some of those highlights we did early in August, September during the meetings. Just our Alice active threat. Just looking at the alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. So working through those. This is the rally points. We have created some maps. So horseman, in the event that an event would take place, they would rally to the Village Park. BAMs, depending on what side of the building you're on, would go to Lemieux or Village Park. Friendship would go to Lemieux Park, Trafford Village, ELC, Lemieux, and then the Phoenix Academy would go to the Village Park. So on any one of those, if you clicked in there, we kind of started to develop some maps. Hopefully it goes. So it just gives some directions on, hey, if you're at Horseman, how do I get there? It should load, yep. Just different streets, different maps, making sure, like, if we have a guest teacher, that's one of the big things. Hey, they've never heard of this, never seen it. Hey, grab your binder, it should be in your binder, take a look at it. So just informing is the biggest thing. We have staff that also are new in the district. They don't know where Village Park is. They don't know where Lemieux Park is. So looking at what's our next steps in that to make sure that all of our staff know that, we can get over there and see those places. So that would be big. And then once you're there, obviously you have to coordinate that too. So not just getting over there, but what does that look like when we're there? So we can account for everybody and make sure that they're there. So for Village Park, if you click on Village Park, you can see every school has a location. This would be provided to Johnson Bus as well. So they would have a general idea, like, hey, in the event this happens and Horseman has to evacuate to the rally point, where 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade are going to be on that second parking lot. You'll have BAMs right in the first one, Trafford Way in there. And we'll all be in those locations so the bus can pull up and get us out of there. Pretty similar to Lemieux Park. You'll have ELC over there, some of BAM's district office, and then FLC. They have the 2 basketball courts, so FLC kind of will take those with 3 grades on each, so we know where to go. ELC will be just south of that, and then district office will be there, and then BAMS will be just off of North Street, so the buses will be able to roll right up on Chapman and North, and we'll load and go. So, yeah, and then just walking through, we did the holds, just what those are, how do we do those, just kind of familiarizing ourselves again with those. Get in, stay in, same thing. And then looking at our crisis management, remembering those, constantly updating those as well, as we continue to, our buildings change a little bit and just process change, and we have to keep adjusting those to make sure that we're up to date on those too. So those will be the big projects as we continue to move forward, for next year as well. And then just next actions, like where are we heading, what are we doing? Just looking at another drill in late spring, possibly. Trying to get our staff and our kids over to rally points. Hopefully with this wet and warm weather, we might be able to do that sooner rather than later. Getting over there and just making sure everybody knows what that is and where it is. And then looking at just specific walkthrough drills and debriefing, doing some Project Adam drills with our medical teams too. Just trying to get ourselves familiar in that space as well. And then looking at monthly safety updates and themes for students and staff next year is how do we remain visible throughout the year? We're doing a lot of work, and we have a lot of work in different areas, but how does safety make sure that we're presenting information to students and staff and families? So we're looking at a monthly thing, whether that's in Oriole time or over here during our morning meetings, just talking about bullying month or bus safety or tornado awareness, just different things within the month that just kind of highlight some of the safety pieces. So. And then obviously in service and drills is constantly doing the reps and looking at what that looks like for the 2024-2025 school year to make sure that we keep practicing and keep learning. And then obviously updating those tornado locations with our fire department. So this is kind of our team. I give a lot of props to our team. They put in a lot of hard work, and these people are in a lot of different areas too. And it's just fun to see where we started and kind of where we are. And we know we have a lot of work to do, but we have the right people there, and we know safety's number one, and our families feel that too, I think, in the work that we're putting in. So we have a long way to go, but we're heading in the right direction. So
if you looked at this a year and a half ago, there's an incredible amount of work that's been done. And I mean, news like Brad and other people on this team, and where we're at. And of course, we always can continue to get better, and we're going to do that. But we're in a really good place in terms of getting these pieces done because people like Brad and others. So really appreciate all of the safety committee and the whole district too. When we bring these things up, obviously this is number one. I mean, we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that we can keep this place as safe as possible. And having things and measures in place like this where we didn't have before, and where there's some consistency K-12 and even ELC level, that's a lot of work. But in the end, it's so we have, I think, I don't want to say comfort, but the understanding that we're prepared to a different level than we were a year and a half ago, and I feel really good that we have that in place. So
yeah. A lot of work to do yet, but a lot of great work done, and this team has really done a lot of work. So
Yeah, shows.
A lot of learning to do yet too. So we're always looking to grow. So that's a big piece too. So
any questions for Brad before moving on?
I'm just excited to hear what you learn at that conference too.
Yeah,
So when you come back next time.
Yeah,
That'd be cool.
that might be nice to come back and share some of
a lot of great learning opportunities there. So I mean, anytime you get yourself in spaces like that, I think it's important. So
great.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Adam, are we ready?
You're ready.
Let's do this. So I'm gonna have you take over, and I think,
I don't know, Dr. Mino, did the board look at that policy or vote on that already for the opting out? Or is that coming up?
that is under coach's agreement. I think what they have to do is just see that. I don't know if we're actually voting on this tonight, but we can I think just sharing those options, just showing people that we have to by law to like have that posted. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have to, it's and this is one for, I think everyone on the board probably voted on this last year, so it's, the board's responsibility with, state assessments and opting out to grant those requests or not. And we've historically had you all vote to give that permission to the building principals if those requests come up, just so that's not like, oh, let's pull the board together to figure those out, so. So yeah, that would be that piece. There are certain grade levels where those requests are just granted, and then there's grade levels where, again, it goes to the school board to determine if that's appropriate or not, so.
Thought it was in here, I'm sure, here we go.
I don't know if you'll get into this, but
yeah,
do parents opt out? Do we have a lot of that?
Yeah, so basically our messaging always is we want 100% participation, state assessments and local assessments and anything we do because it's good for kids, or we wouldn't do those things. So, you know, I've tracked that every year since I've been here. I think we've had less than 10 kids. So that's, I think I did the math, it's less than 0.5% of parents that request that. I think when we had COVID, like a lot of districts, that went up to maybe, you know, 2%, but typically, you know, if we do have students opting out, it's maybe just because maybe of needs they have where they physically can't take the assessment or that's appropriate. And sometimes parents may request that, not knowing what goes into that or how that data is used or how that data is good for them or for their students. So sometimes just explain that to the parents, then they're like, oh, that's what this is? Okay, yeah, then we want our child to do that. So yeah, so district-wide, it's typically less than 10 kids.
Okay. So I think as a statute, we just need to make sure that our families are notified that they have those rights to be able to do those things within that area, according to this. I think this is something that we sent out last year, the same thing around as well, so. Okay. We don't have it on the docket for like new discussion of vote or anything on it. I think it was just an agenda item that we had it on before, same as last, but that was the same thing that was approved. But
yeah, I don't know if that one is maybe, like, I don't know if that educational options might be just different than that opt-out piece, just from what I understand.
Yeah, so I don't know if we had the opt-out piece within this agenda then for that. I think we had it like, I thought you were talking about it, but I didn't know we were voting on anything at that point.
Yeah, and I don't really know. From what I know, we've voted on it every year, and I think it's good because I think how it reads is it's the board's responsibility. So I think for you all to vote to say, well, all the principals of the building to have that right. Unless you want to fall new every year, we kind of pass it on. So something we can get to.
We can add it Thursday, just put it on. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so other than that then, or I guess any other thoughts or questions on that opt-out piece?
Just one quick one. I hear sometimes of districts who kind of promote opting out students who may drag numbers down. Is that still a thing or?
Yeah, and we were just talking as a, actually today as a administrative team just talking about too that we don't want to play those games, of course. And again, most of the time, if you talk to the parent about why they want to opt out and have that conversation and tell them, here's why we take this assessment, or here's what it would look like for your child, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And, so yeah, but definitely not to fudge numbers or anything like that. We don't do that. So, and we do have, when we look at like the state report cards and the federal report cards, there are some districts and schools could be dinged for having too many students not test. So we haven't really fallen into that in my time here. So, but it's something that we're aware of too. And again, sometimes it's out of our control because there are grade levels where parents can just request that and we have to honor that. But again, I think typically probably the trust of our families that if they had that concern and we explained to them, typically like, oh, that makes sense, but. Oh, sure, great. Awesome. And then, just wanted to come back. So we had shared some info with you all about just some things in teaching and learning in, I think, December-ish maybe. So kind of going to circle back to some of those thoughts that we brought up at that time. And again, trying to give you probably, this may be a 5-day, full day conference on what we're talking about here, or 2 years worth of a master's degree to get this understanding. So again, just kind of high level look at this and definitely interrupt and ask questions and really encourage you to talk to our teachers about some of this work, because this is the work that they've been doing. So, and I had a couple teachers I was hoping to come here. A couple of them just last second were not able to make it due to sick kids and other things. But again, encourage you to talk to our administrators and teachers. So, oops, oh boy. Work the mouse here. So this question up on the screen there. So this is that question we've been anchoring our work in this year. We talked about those collaborative teams last time. I presented to the board on this. So we'll look at some of those, that information again, just so you guys kind of reacclimate, and then talk about what are some of the things we do when we look at that question. What do we expect students to learn? So there's specific tasks that we've been doing and having our educators and administrators involved in that I want to highlight today. This all aligns to those pieces that we've been talking about tonight and throughout the year. So our KPIs for learning and academics, lines for our cultural and academic expectations, and this is ongoing work that isn't just 1 year and done, or 2 years and done. It's going to be, we always tell our staff, it's this work, it never ends essentially, and that's how we have to look at it. And then as we look at, again, our how we do business in our district and in our system, we've seen this visual before of how our grader system within our KPIs flows to that building level and individual teacher work, and then also back in the other direction. So, so when we had talked previously, we talked about this concept of collaborative teams, and kind of the biggest thing I kind of task you all with is, if you don't know or learn anything else, think about it's time for our teachers to be talking about student learning. So that's what that time on those Thursday mornings is for. And within that time, again, there's more complexity to that, which we'll get into some of those steps that teachers have been doing, but that's the key point of that. And again, here's those 4 questions that drive our work in those team times. And I'll show you again too, kind of our timing for those, but typically each question is about 1 year's worth of work. And again, that work's never done, but we're in that top bullet point for this year, and then we'll move into that second one for next year, collectively K-12, but we'll still be building habits in that first one. And these questions happen at that micro and macro level. So we talked about that too. When I have a student in front of me, I need to be thinking about, what is this student, do I need this student to learn this moment? I also have to be thinking about, hey, what do I want my whole class to learn in this lesson for this day? What do I want my whole class to learn for the entire school year? So we think about those at the micro and macro level. I get the opportunity sometimes to work with other districts across the country, and it was perfect timing that I took a picture of this. This was a district, actually a collection of districts in Nebraska I was working with, and they had this on their wall. I think this was a high school classroom I was in. So, you know, I think some of you have mentioned being at some things for the board where you felt like, oh yeah, I heard about this collaborative team thing, and we're on the right track. And so I kind of saw that and snapped a picture of that. Again, nothing's really controversial. It's pretty just foundational things when it comes to teaching and learning. This is that repeat of kind of what our focus is and what collaborative teams look like and how that time's being spent. And you'll see those parallels to those questions again. So we're in that number 2, that first question, what do we want students to learn? And we'll dive into that. That following year will be the assessment piece to that. And just tying this back to, we looked at this data piece too. So when we asked that question of what do we expect students to learn, that really helps with that teacher clarity piece. So the more clear we are as adults, the more clear that instruction can be for our students. So if we don't have the answer to that, it's really hard for our students to know what that answer is or what they're expected to learn. So it starts with us, and then that transitions down to students. So when we look at this slide here, you can see on top that some of the collective research says that a 0.4 effect size is about 1 year's worth of growth. So you can see that teacher clarity piece, the more clear we are on what we want students to learn, that's almost 2 years worth of growth. And then again, we're doing that collectively K through 12, and that's a really big impact when you have your whole system moving in that direction. So here are the key pieces that all of our teams are working on and have been working towards. So we're gonna highlight the top two today. I wanted to show you what we mean by those terms. So we're gonna talk, I'll show you what priority standards look like, how we select those. And then we'll look at the proficiency scales and how those get into learning targets that we expect students to learn. And then probably coming back another time and diving into some other pieces of scope and sequence and instructional design, but keep it a little bit lighter here for today. If you think about, and I probably shared this research with you all on the board here, but if you think about all the standards that we have in K-12 education for every content area, there's some researchers that have done the math, and it would take students 23 years worth of school to get to master all those standards. So most districts, knowing that, say, hey, we've got 13 years, we need to prioritize standards because we don't have 23 years with our kids. We prioritize standards like a lot of districts do. And this is the criteria we use. So all these have equal weight, but we look at, does the standard, and again, it could be a math standard, could be a social studies standard, could be a family consumer ed standard. Does it have endurance? So does it last beyond 1 year's worth of learning? Does it have leverage? So does it go into other content areas? So maybe it's a reading or writing standard, which, hey, students are going to be reading and writing in science and social studies and other areas where, hey, that has leverage for other learning. Is that standard kind of foundational because it prepares them for other standards and other learning down the road? And then is that standard tied to local or state assessments where that has more meaning for those opportunities for students? So all those have equal weight. Sometimes I think that last one especially, sometimes we have to help us as administrators and educators to say it's not all about the state test scores. If we do things right within teaching and learning, those will take care of themselves. But again, we do want to prioritize those, and we have our teachers use that language K through 12 to identify what those priority pieces are. Because something's a priority standard, 1 year, it might not be a priority standard the next year. Student learning drives all of this. So when we started this year, we said, hey, teams, take a look at your priority standards. Are those the standards that have the most importance for us in this school year? And when we start next year in August, that will be something we have all of our teams do again, is, hey, relook at our priority standards. Are those still the standards that drive the learning for that year? If not, we make those tweaks. We add or take away from that. So, and again, base it on the foundation of those criteria. So once we have, again, those priority standards, because we don't have enough time, and no district does, to teach every standard to mastery, then what we start to do is take that standard, which is typically really complex, especially at the higher levels, and start to transition that into a learning target. So one standard, and I'll show you an example here in a second, one standard typically can be broken down to about 2 to 5 skills that we need kids to understand and be able to do to meet the level of that standard. So once we have our priority standards, we have teachers take a close look at those standards and start to deconstruct them. So that's a term that you'll hear our teachers use, deconstructing a standard. So we get a good look at that standard, we attend to the language of that standard, and then we're going to break that down. Okay, what skills or what do we need evidence of to know that students have mastered that standard? And again, typically it's not one thing, it's a collection of skills that we have to give kids and then plan for when we give them that learning. And then that last bullet point, and there's big time complexity in this, and myself as an administrator and as a teacher, I can be fooled sometimes when I look at standards. If I don't take time to really internalize that, I might look at it quick and, oh, I know what this standard's asking kids to do. So again, we really want to provide time and encourage our teachers collectively to look at those standards, and again, get a good look at those to really identify what skills that standard is asking our students to be able to do. An example of that is this standard here. This is a second grade math standard. So you can see there's kind of a lot there, and on first look, sometimes what can happen is a teacher might look at this standard or an administrator and say, oh, so we just want kids to add and subtract within 100. And if we don't take the time to really deconstruct that standard, we might be fooled by that, when really this standard, where the complexity lies, is really having students using strategies that are correlated to things they've already learned to do that adding, subtracting to 100. So that's one of those nuances within, and this is again just second grade, but within all of our standards, there's nuances like that, you know, that team approach to looking at a standard and deconstructing that really helps with our understanding, because we have to kind of sometimes push back on each other about, hey, I think this standard is really saying this, or this is where the urgency lies in that standard. And then again, typically one standard is not going to be just one skill, or one learning target, but a collection of those. So in this example, again, the learning target that could be tied to this could be something like, okay, we will group by 10s and 5s to add 2-digit numbers. There could be another target maybe saying, hey, we'll group by 10s and 5s to subtract 2-digit numbers. So again, kind of as you go through and think about those strategies being used, and the true language of that standard, our teachers and our teams might come up with, again, 2 to 5 different skills that tell us that students need to be able and demonstrate learning of all those skills to master that standard. And those skills then that we pull apart from that standard, we put those and make those visible for our students. So those are what our learning targets are those skills that students need to learn. So these are the kind of look fors we use in our district. So we like those to start with that we will. So we will, you saw that in the last example, we will group by 10s and 5s. Sometimes teachers will use an I can or a we can or an I will. There's really no research on what those first introductory words are, so we don't nitpick that, but kind of universally we want to say, hey, like we will, just so our students are seeing that same language. And then we want that standard noted on that learning target, just so that, again, it's kind of that accountability check for us that we are aligning our teaching to something that's really important and going to have the most impact for our students. And then having that be a clear learning target, so it's one skill, it's readable for the teacher and students, and using some academic language that students need to build within learning. And that last piece kind of touched on, it's viewable, available to students, so that they can help guide their learning to be part of that. If you've been in some of our classes, you probably have seen these and should see these. These are just a bunch of different examples of learning targets and how they might look across some of our classrooms. There's one on a computer screen there. Some of our classrooms use technology and slide decks, so they have that on a slide deck when students come in the room and state that learning target. That one's an interesting one too. On the computer screen there, they also, that team decided like, hey, we want to put a little visual too that ties to what that skill is, just to help with that clarity for the students and for ourselves. So it's like, yeah, you could totally do that. That's going to help with student learning and clarity. Go for it. So, and you can see some other examples there from, I think we have some middle school science, kindergarten, family consumer ed, math classes. And so this is, again, kind of not starting with this, but this will be the document that we use when we deconstruct that standard. We have that standard up in that gray box on top. And then where that orange arrow is, as evidenced by classroom assessments, the student is able to, and that's where we put those skills or those learning targets that we have deconstructed from that standard. So this is a proficiency scale for our 8th grade science. And again, you can see that standard is very complex up top and then broken down into those pieces, those 4 learning targets and 4 skills that students will be focused on. So again, typically a grade level will have maybe 8 standards. So they're creating this proficiency scale for 8. So 8 pages of that, and basically then they get maybe 25 targets. So I love when we get to that point, I say to the team, great, look at that. You've got 25 things that we need to ensure kids leave your class knowing, which sounds much more doable than saying, hey, there's 200 things you need to have kids learn and know before you leave. Again, the math says that's impossible to get to all that. So again, that's where we prioritize and get it down to those doable chunks. And student learning rules the day with all this. I think we probably said that last time when I presented in November, but if students aren't learning, we go back and we say, okay, we can dissect, hey, did we pick the wrong priority standard? Is that why we're not seeing the learning that we think is appropriate? Do we not have the right targets? You know, I didn't highlight those today, but are there things within our scope and sequence and the timing that that we're teaching that maybe are not right? Is it the instructional practices? Is it the assessments? Then we start to do some of that work. Kind of like a doctor would have diagnosed, okay, why aren't kids learning? And we go back to these documents and make adjustments if needed. So again, this is a piece that all teachers have access to this, all administrators in our shared drive. And this is great too if someone says, hey, what are you focused on in 8th grade science? What are your priority pieces? That teacher can just hand that to the next year's teacher, the previous year's teacher, and say, here's what I'm focused on, here's when I'm teaching that, and here's what that instruction looks like. So really being as clear as possible on those foundational pieces. And the wording, again, when we start something out, the wording I really like to use, because there's complexity in this, is we've used the phrase building habits. So as we've been working with learning targets and doing some of that work of deconstructing standards, we want teachers to build the habit of doing that. It's not something that you do at once and you've got it down and you've mastered that from the educational standpoint. So you know, having teachers in that space and doing that routinely. So next year, as we move away from this formally, this will still take place. This question 1 work, and we'll use that phrase. And hey, we're going to start moving towards precision with those pieces and start building habits in that assessment space. And kind of behind the scenes too with all this, and this kind of all ties in again to work that's coming up and in future years, but you know, I check in with our principals routinely and making sure they understand what those pieces are and what those foundational things are that we need to have in place. I'll check in with teams and with principals too on that work, just to make sure, hey, typically the question I ask teams is, do you feel like you have good direction on what you're doing now? They have a checklist available to them, which just basically outlines what those things are they to accomplish, that clarifies that question of what we expect students to learn. We allow teachers to do some self-reflection too on that when they're meeting within their CT teams, and specifically around those learning targets too. Hey, how do you feel like you're doing with that? You know, something I've been doing the last couple months is just interviewing kids in our schools and asking them about those learning targets and just saying, hey, are you seeing those up? And what are those for? And So it's been really great to ask kindergartners through 12th graders about that. Super fun. I asked one kindergartner, and I think he thought I was maybe a really important person. And his teacher was standing right next to me, and he was very serious when he answered. He's like, "I've never seen learning targets," and the teacher just laughed. I'm like, "What? You've seen them?" And I'm like, "Do you know what those are?" "No, I don't know what they are." So, as I interviewed kids, some of those students, it's not an exact science, but it's just fun to hear what they think and how they think those some of those steps impact what they're doing. So, and then we meet every Monday and do some planning around again that question one work of what do we expect students to learn. So we meet as an admin team to go through some of that. And again, that work is foundational as we get into next year. We can't assess the learning if we don't know what we want kids to learn in the first place. So, and again, the work never ends, and we constantly cycle through that. So how kids respond to learning has us go back to some of those questions and rework things if it's not to that level, a high level like we expect our students to be able to do. And yeah, so something else as we come back maybe before the end of this year, I'd love to show you that scope and sequence too. So that's basically our teachers map out when do you teach these things then, and how does that instruction look? How do you assess that information or those skills? So we have them map out that year. And again, we don't expect teachers to be at that exact moment in time, but they know that all that learning fits within 1 year, and we have a plan on paper, and then of course we adjust and tweak as needed. And again, if someone wants to know, hey, when do we teach that? Where does that learning take place? We can go and look K through 12 and find where that is. And that might be the last one there. So again, kind of a lot of information. We'll go back up just to, again, these pieces here. So within that question one work, again, these are some of the steps that our teachers are doing. And we kind of just showed you those priority standards and how we turn those into then learning targets that become our focus when teaching. Thoughts or questions? Is this something that's new to you, seeing some of this? Is this something that you've heard of before?
What's the acceptance of the staff been in doing this work?
Yeah, it's awesome for me to be able to work with all the teams, because some, it's like teaching in a classroom. Some, I guess all of our adults are in every different spot on the continuum, right? So some, maybe it hasn't connected. Oh, why do we have to prioritize this? Or why do we need to have a learning target? Some are in that space where we're nudging them to, I guess, see the importance more and see how that fits in that bigger picture of just their classroom. And then some are, it just clicks right away, and they are just kind of love getting their hands dirty in this space. So, but that's too where that collectively, it's not necessarily a choice, right? Hey, we're going to prioritize standards. It's good practice. We're going to have learning targets up because we know that's good practice for you and for our students, and these other pieces as well. So, so I think for the most part, I think teachers understand that and feel good about that. I think our administrators do too. So, but to that too, I would say, I don't know if we weren't doing it, I don't know if people would be like, hey, in my free time, I'm going to go and do some of this and deconstruct standards. I don't know if people would do that, but.
It's really establishing that foundation, and that's it's dirty work. You have to really work out and tease out and take some time to do that. And I think for some, they're like, well, how is that anything what I'm doing with what's going on in my classroom on the regular? Because they haven't brought it back to that alignment yet. And then that next phase, as we start getting to year 2 here with that assessment, and you start talking about, oh, what are your activities? What do you do? How does it relate? It's all got to go back to that first part. But I think the initial is a little bit, I think they see it. I think they know it. It's just, I think the hard part is like, okay, so where's this coming in yet? Because they're still doing some of their own things within that frame and whatever they've developed, which that will all have to be looked at too in the years to come to make sure that we're all on the same page, working toward the same thing.
So do you have like a number of standards or learning targets by grade that you're looking for? And are you making progress against what that total number is?
Yeah, so I guess the first question, so typically for all of our grades, all of our content areas, they probably, when they prioritize standards, there's maybe 8 to 12 that end up being, hey, these meet that criteria that we looked at before. So then we base all of our work on those next steps on those 8 to 12 standards. And then the other piece I think that you were asking maybe is then assessing those and making sure we really know, have kids learn the components of that standard or not. So our focus is on those priority pieces.
Right. So I guess, I'm not sure how to ask it, but are you seeing progress in the number of those being developed? And so you know that these meetings are productive and you're getting those things out of there?
Yeah, and that's where that shared drive comes into play. So all of our administrators have access to that. You know, we want to breed that collective efficacy too. So if you teach science, you're going to have access to 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and high school science. So you can see any of those, and you know, again, nothing to hide, or you know, we want that collaboration going on too. So yeah, you know, there is some undone work within those right now, but sometimes that's okay too, because kind of like I said before, all the adults, all the teams are a little bit different. So sometimes it's hey, we're stuck right here. We're not sure how this connects. And then we do some just-in-time teaching for that team. But yeah, again, that organization piece, I think we're in a good spot just because it's all in one spot. We have checklists with notes and highlights of, yep, this is done. No, it isn't. We're in a good spot here. We want to tweak this, or we need to relook at this. So it's nice when those teams are kind of driving that work too, where they, again, see that importance. So they're like, hey, yeah, we know we have to go back and look at this. So yeah, we're in a good spot. But again, that work never ends too. So sometimes, you know, I'll quote unquote accept something. If a team has like 15 priority standards, I might say like, hey, that's fine. Maybe it's a little bit more than I'd like to do, but you all are owning that and feel good about that. So let's see how it fits into the school year, and then let's dominate and do great things for kids. And if it ends up being too much, we can always pare that back. So I want, again, those teachers to own that work and drive that. Yeah, other thoughts or questions? And if you talk to their board members, this is pretty foundational. So I don't really know of any districts not doing this. So.
But again, moving us towards that universal, so we're all functioning in the same fashion. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Just having that under the hood, like, examination of like how this is all happening. And I appreciate Adam for making the time to do this, but just the orchestration too, because it takes a lot of this, and you kind of underplayed the amount of time, like, you know, meetings with administrators every single week. Both as a large group and then every other week, like with each one of those individuals to check in and say, hey, how are you doing, where you're at, and getting feedback from all of them. And then building off of that, like, what do we need? How do we need more support? What can we do to design that? There's a lot of stuff that's going on to make sure and ensure this stuff is happening. So we really appreciate that. That's making, again, that's going to be those gains that are going to help bigger picture in these other places. So any other questions or?
No, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Adam. We'll swing back to this quick. Yeah. The size back there. So. All right. So we'll bring back the opt-out Thursday. That posting of ACT Educational, that is just options showing that we have available for families, and it's more or less just to let you know it's a state statute. It's not something that they'll sign in on. So that was already said there too. So future board agenda items, obviously election coming into play. Valedictorian and salutatorian coming up as we're getting closer and closer to graduation this year. Top 10 and scholarship winners, we'll bring that back in March. Evaluation check-in. USI, which we kind of alluded to already, but they might come and visit us too, just to share who they are within that insurance world as just an intro and update for everybody else. I know, we've got performances from the music world coming in April already, so there's other things coming in that range. So a lot of good stuff coming ahead, moving forward here. I know contracts too for staff coming in March as well. Hopefully we can run through that. So, any other questions from the report? Okay. New business.
All right, we got 5 items on our new business today. The first one is discuss and consider spring 2024 coaches agreements.
This is what this is. It's more for you to say, noting that we have people in positions and acknowledging that, and then basically moving forward, noting it.
So there's no action needed?
No action, just for awareness. And I think there's an approval of these individuals, even though there's, other than they've already been hired. And I think in the past, it's been just in terms of approval. Steve, I don't know, I'm gonna defer to you too, like for spring coaches, other than saying that these are the individuals who are in here.
Typically, we just approve contracted employees.
Okay.
Because they have a contract with the board and the administration handles this stuff.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
the report is good to know who's what, and
so.
And of course, if there's ever HR type of issues with the crowd, would come back to the board.
So do we do that approval of contract now, or? is it
No, they
just
don't
a-
have contracts, I don't believe.
They don't have contracts.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for so there's no action on it?
No.
Okay. All right, any questions or discussion on what was shared with the spring 2024 coaches agreements? All right, our next item is discuss and consider moving the March Board of Education meeting from March 25th to March 18th. So see if there's any discussion on that. Otherwise, we'll look for a motion to move the meeting to the 18th.
I guess just the reason we should probably talk about that.
People's availability for that day, and the board as well as myself, I'm not gonna be in the presence on that day. I mean, not that, and just seeing if we can shift that to that other, a little bit earlier than what we've had been.
Is that the spring break week or?
That's the week before spring break. Yeah.
Okay. I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, and then roll call.
Hawk, yes. Matthew?
Yes.
Deckerman,
Yeah, yes.
Lopsky here, and Yeager.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, our third item, we're gonna bench, right now it's discuss and consider compensation model because we're gonna come back into closed session after our new business item today. So we'll move that to a future agenda. And then our next item is discuss and consider employee retirements from closed session. So it is retirement season. We have 5 retirements that are coming up at the end of this school year. And the names that we have currently are Mike McDowell, Reed Hansen, Judy McHugh, I said Mitko, Michelle Dieter, and Julie Scar. So we have 5 educators that are retiring at the end of this school year. And before I turn it over to discussion, I just want to thank each of them. A lot of great tenure and a lot of great leadership and support of our community. And just really proud of all 5 of them taking that opportunity to enjoy a new chapter of life. So I'll open up if there's any discussion or questions. Okay, and then we'll just look for a motion to approve those 5 retirements.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and then roll.
Okay, Matthew?
Yes.
Yeager?
Yes.
Huck, yes, and Geckerman,
Yes.
Levansky, absent.
And our final item is discuss and consider new hires from closed session. So we have actually one new hire to discuss. It's for Ted May, who will be a new director of facilities. He'll be joining us in July and partnering with Dave for a bit of time until Dave's retirement in December, which we're proud of everything Dave's doing. So just excited for Ted May to join the Oriole team and really start taking on that role in July. So looking for any discussion or any questions on that approval. Then a motion to approve that contract.
So moved.
And then roll call.
Matthew,
Yes.
Jaeger,
Yes.
Geckerman,
Yes.
Levansky, absent, and Huck, yes. Motion carries.
Motion carries, and that is all of our new business for today. So we will actually move back to closed session. So we'll look for a motion to move to closed session.
So,
Second.
Okay, and then roll call.
Jaeger,
yes.
Matthew,
Yes.
Geckerman,
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
Huck, yes, and
We are in closed session.